LFG will. That's all I have to say. Three letters captures it all. And if you're out there and you know what it means, LFG. I trust Elon Musk in politics more than I trust the Jacksonville Jaguars to be in the AFC Championship in 2024, Will.
I really fancy Sean McVay to put something smart together for them.
Is this a prediction?
I think the Rams might upset the Vikings. And it's why you're picking number 1 overall, Tennessee. And it's why you're not going to get good despite your picking number 1.
The New York Giants, God, they look like an absolute disaster again. Brian Dable has looked absolutely clueless for the last year. Jerry Mayo was not cut up for that job. They had to get rid of him.
Welcome back to talkSPORT's dedicated NFL YouTube channel, talkSPORT Endzone, and our weekly show, NFL Rundown. We took a little break over the holiday period. Not that, there was much going on in the NFL around then. I'm Will Gavin, Brian T. Swift with me as well. And the playoffs are here. We're into the postseason, Brian. The Super Bowl is just 4 short weeks away. And with the 14 teams we've got, I could not be more hyped.
LFG, Will. That's all I have to say. Three letters captures it all. And if you're out there and you know what it means, LFG.
Right. So here's how we're going to do today's show. We're going to talk about the coaching hirings and firings. We've just had Black Monday. We're going to break those down in a little while. And we're going to go through the Super Wildcard Weekend games. Of course, 5 out of the 6 of which you can catch live on the talkSPORT network. But I think we should start off by revisiting how we felt about this season at the beginning of the year and going into the playoffs.
Everything we got right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's look at everything we got right when we were setting up this amazing, historic, chaotic, brilliant NFL season. Mostly everything that you got right, but everything that we got right.
We are here to firmly pat ourselves on the back, or pat one of us on the back, while we have to old yeller and take the other one out the back. Look, I want to do this because I want to look at how we feel about it now, after Week 18, going into this playoffs. How set are we on what the Super Bowl matchup's going to be? Who's going to get there? Who's going to win? But I made the error of making my predictions on radio in a studio with cameras in it. And let's start.
Like as part of your job.
Yeah,
let's start. You made the error of doing your job.
Let's start 2025 off with a bang, with a bit of self-flagellation, and let's start off with my AFC playoff predictions. I do have the Jets as a wildcard team, spoiler warning, but I've got the Bills as my AFC East winners. I do also have the Cincinnati Bengals as my AFC North winners. I do have the Chiefs winning the AFC West.
Standard. Wouldn't expect anything less.
And for the AFC South, go on, who you got?
I've got the Texans.
I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm struggling with my AFC wildcard. I'm going to give you my 4, who it's between.
Okay.
And it's the Ravens, the
Understood.
Dolphins, the Jets,
and
the Los Angeles Chargers. Let's do our conference championship as well.
Oh.
I had the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Super Bowl 59 by beating the Jacksonville Jaguars in the AFC Championship game. It was rough. Hey, I said the Chargers were going to be a playoff team again. That was right.
How many did you get right?
I didn't even count. I gave up. I had the Jets as a wild card team.
Here's the thing. You believed in the Jacksonville Jaguars to do what?
Right. Go back to 2023.
We're not going. This is 2025. We're not doing a history lesson. We're not going back to 2023. We don't need an essay on the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I'm not looking for an
Jaguars
essay.
Just fired their coach. Everyone knew they were going to be bad. They were even worse than that. And I'm not going to pile on, but it's pretty easy to pile on right now.
It feels like you're piling on.
Bengals, that's okay. Jets, no. But the Jacksonville, I trust Elon Musk in politics more than I trust the Jacksonville Jaguars to be in the AFC Championship in 2024, Will.
Listen, once every kind of 10 years or so, the Jags put up a decent team. I thought this was going to be it. I'd looked at the 2023 season where they were like 9 wins to start the year. 9-2, I think they were, 9-3. And then Lawrence gets injured, they collapse, right? And the defense hadn't changed much. I didn't know they were going to turn into the worst pass defense in the NFL.
They still had Doug
I didn't know the offensive line was going to fall apart.
They still had Mr. Khan as their owner, who brings back Trent Baalke.
Oh, we're going to get into that, don't you worry.
What the bleep is that? No, I mean, it's hard though. Predictions are the worst business in the world. I've gotten the Super Bowl right and picked the score right, and I literally made it up on the spot on my couch, hanging out with the dog. So I feel for you, man, but you got it wrong in 2024.
Do you want to know how wrong I got it in 2024?
Let's hear.
So I went Bengals, Jaguars as my AFC Championship game with the Bengals going to the Super Bowl. Neither team made the playoffs. Bengals were close. Let's be honest.
Bengals were close.
We'd rather be seeing Joe Burrow in the postseason than the Steelers or the Broncos, right? So, at least that was fun. Should we watch my NFC?
It's a must-watch.
There's an element of homerism to this, I'm not going to lie. Division winners. I'll just run you through mine.
Okay.
I have the Lions.
Agreed.
I have the 49ers. I know these are maybe obvious ones.
Agreed.
For the NFC South, I've gone with the Falcons. One team comes out of the NFC East.
I am with you.
Either the Eagles or the Cowboys.
Yep.
And the one that misses out on the playoffs entirely. I have the Packers.
Yep.
I have the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
As a fun 7th seed wild card. My feeling on the Seahawks is, and this is as a 49ers fan, Mike McDonald couldn't be the more perfect head coach for them to bring in. I do, however, have the 49ers beating the Lions in the NFC title game because...
Of course you do. Spoken like a true Niners
couldn't resist
fan.
it. And then all this talk about three-peats this year, there will be a three-peat because for the third time in Super Bowl history, the San Francisco 49ers will beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Super Bowl 16, Super Bowl 23, and now Super Bowl 59 as the quest for 6 comes to an end and the San Francisco 49ers finally hoist a Lombardi for Kyle Shanahan. I was so pumped.
Well, do you think it's like 1980 still?
Yeah.
It's like 1980 and
Sam Weiss
Joe
not coaching,
Montana versus who was the Bengals quarterback from the early 80s?
Big Boomer.
It wasn't even Boomer. There was a game before
Prior to
that.
Oh,
Will, you are a pretty intelligent, well-rounded, very professional. Love doing this show with you. No personal. This is business. This is not personal. Those are some of the worst predictions I've ever heard in my life. And you went full homer with the 49ers. But here's my biggest problem. The Chicago Bears, as a fun 7th seed, they fired their coach midseason. Caleb Williams is crying. What the? Come on, man.
What it is fun, and to bring this back round, the way that this is fun is it just shows us, as much as all that off-season bluster, and we enjoy doing it, everyone talked about Caleb Williams was going into the best situation that quarterback has walked into.
But he was still with the Bears.
For this, however many years.
But he was still with the Bears. You have to factor in the coach and the team and the franchise and recent history, and it all goes together.
There was so much positivity about them going to the year, and no one was talking about the Vikings.
No, you can say
the
that.
The Vikings won 14 games of football, and most people didn't have them touching the playoffs.
And this is what I feel about predictions, right? Because nobody in the world, I'm going to back you up on this part, not everything else, because those are the worst predictions I've ever heard in my life, but nobody in the world was predicting that Sam Darnold would lead the Vikings into the playoffs and they win 14 games to go down to the number 1 seed. Nobody was predicting that. But it's a tough business for professionals, and those are the most unprofessional picks I've ever heard. And they sounded like it was from 1982. I'm going to have the glorious San Francisco 49ers.
The 49ers were the preseason favorites. They were the preseason NFC favorites. No one knew about the injuries. There was a lot of nonsense happening around the team, and maybe we should have predicted the down year.
There's a little drama.
That's fair, and it was a bad pick. My AFC ones are the shameful ones. My AFC ones are the ones where I went super hipster and tried to be clever.
Yeah, don't do that. Stop doing the NFL nerd Twitter thing. It doesn't really suit you well. Stick with reason. Stick with facts. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles. That sounds like a pretty smart Super Bowl pick to me.
Oh, right.
The Detroit Lions. Stick with facts.
So the other problem, and this is a media problem, this is a general problem.
I have a lot of media problems too.
I do a podcast, I do this, I do the website, I do on air. Elsewhere, I predicted the Rams to win the NFC West, and I got shouted down for that.
Wait. Did you do multiple predictions?
Do you not do
Nobody does that.
Yeah, I tell you, everyone does that. I promise you.
That is
everyone
completely
on ESPN,
unfair.
No,
that is completely unfair.
These are my ones of note. I'm going to hold my hands up. These are my predictions of note.
But Will, do you realize that if you do 5 different predictions, you're eventually going to get something right?
Exactly. That's the point. Yeah, you figured it out. Look, the talkSPORT.com predictions, which I admittedly submitted a week and a half before this, I had Chiefs-Lions as my Super Bowl there.
That's a pretty good
pick. The 2-1
pick.
seed. You had Chiefs-Eagles there. I think I just really talked myself out of the Chiefs in the last 10 days before the season started. And do you know what? I think I was proven right in the way they played.
Ahead of the curve on being a Chiefs hater. But now, last time we did this show, if I remember correctly, you now believe who's winning the Super Bowl.
So I still think that either the Buffalo Bills or Baltimore Ravens go into Kansas City
Man, the Ravens
and
are
win that
dangerous
game.
right now. They are really dangerous.
since the Ravens made the switch in the defense and put Kyle Hamilton as a straight-up free safety and let him marshal the defense, that's the moment that really, for me, they became so dangerous. I think they could go to Buffalo and win if they win next weekend, which I expect them to do over a moribund Steelers team. We'll get into these games a bit more. But I really like the Bills or Ravens to go to Kansas City and win still. The Chiefs are playing the best football they've played all year. They've basically had 2 bye weeks after resting all of their starters against the Broncos this week. But they feel cold, and those 2 teams feel like coming in hot. So I like that from the AFC. From the NFC, this Sunday game, Sunday Night Football was the biggest regular season game of all time.
That was absolutely fantastic.
Right? No time in NFL history had 2 teams ever faced each other with more than a combined 25 wins. These 2 teams had a combined 28 wins and were facing each other in the final week of the season for the number 1 seed. It was huge.
And I love that it was Jared Goff versus Sam Darnold. Neither quarterback a couple years ago was on anybody's list to have a number 1 seed in Detroit or in Minnesota. It was an absolute must-watch, to the point that you wake up on Monday morning and you have to read everything about it, and it could affect the entire playoff run.
But they bring Alex Anzalone back from injury. Yes, they lost Terry Arnold, the cornerback, in this game as well, but the defense for the first time in a while stood up. And for the first time, you saw really bad Sam Darnold when put in a high-pressure situation. And I just think that the Lions, off the back of last year, have learnt so much.
I've been saying that.
You have been.
I've been saying
and
that.
I hold my hands up and say, you're right. I think the Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl from the NFC. So I like Lions-Bills, Lions-Ravens as our Super Bowl.
I've been saying this for a while now. Lions-Bills would just be the NFL's dream, right? I don't know if that's going to happen. I will say, looking back at your predictions, I'm reminded about this season and just how unpredictable it has been. We spent the whole season saying, rightfully so at the time, the Chiefs were not good enough. You know, they were the luckiest team in NFL history. They didn't deserve to be undefeated. All those things. They finally get to the last game. They basically tank it because they didn't need to play. They help out Denver. Now is Kansas City, is rest going to be good for them? Patrick Mahomes gets to heal for a couple weeks, but they've been the most inconsistent, really good team all season. Detroit looks like they finally have found it again. They get some rest, but will time off be good for Detroit? I feel like also you could talk yourself into, and speaking of predictions, that the Lions have survived this way and excelled this way because they just have to keep surviving every week. What's it going to be like when they have a couple weeks off? But they'll be at home, which I really like for them. I really like this Eagles team. I mean, for me, it always comes down to, well, you're going to have to win 2 or 3 games to get to the Super Bowl. And even if you're playing at home in a dome, you're going to have to be good enough on both sides of the ball. And so we can talk about all these teams, but in the end, you have to have a good enough of a defense and a good enough of an offense, be well coached, special teams, discipline, all those things. There's only a few teams for me that really qualify like that. The one team that I am very interested in the playoffs, and you already mentioned them, is the Baltimore Ravens. I just look at the way that Lamar Jackson turned it on at the end of the season. They're going to beat the Steelers. They start to make a run, and at some point, Lamar Jackson will be in a Super Bowl is this year for him. And if that happens, that knocks out Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and that knocks out Josh Allen and the Bills.
Your picks were basically pretty bang on. You had Chiefs, Eagles.
I'm right at some time.
I could still imagine that being the Super Bowl. I don't think it will be based on what we've just said, but I still think that's it. You didn't go out on a limb and do all of your division picks and everything else.
I didn't have next year I will on
don't you worry.
talkSPORT.com.
Don't you worry. And I'll be making sure to time code everything you say the entire year to make sure we can do this again in a year's time. Look, we're going to break down all the specific matchups from Super Wildcard Weekend. All 6 games. We'll talk about them, 5 of which you're going to be able to hear live on talkSPORT 2, and plenty of reaction across the talkSPORT End Zone YouTube page. And also, we're going to talk Black Monday. 5 teams right now, no head coach. Should there still be a couple in there who lose it before the end of the week? We'll talk about some of the candidates who got it wrong and maybe who should have fired some of their coaches as well. So that's all coming up on the NFL Rundown here on talkSPORT End Zone. You're back on the NFL Rundown here on talkSPORT End Zone, talkSPORT's dedicated NFL YouTube channel. Brian, Super Wildcard Weekend. Are we still calling it Super Wildcard
I do not.
Weekend?
That's a TV construction. I don't buy into it. It's Wild Card Weekend. I don't need the preface. It's just Wild Card Weekend, Will.
Fine. So 6 games, 12 of the best teams in the NFL played across Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 5 of these 6 games are live on talkSPORT 2. Just big picture, we're going to break down each of these and make our picks for them. But just big picture, is there a game in particular you're excited about, or maybe an underdog that you really fancy in these 6 games? Because there's always a surprise.
I'm not doing this because I covered the Houston Texans for 10 years, or however long. And I watched that franchise go. I'm not going in that place. I'm not going to pull a 49ers or a Jaguars history lesson like you did in the previous segment, Will. But the Texans-Chargers game really intrigues me because this is a Texans team, speaking of predictions, that a lot of people, including me, Super Bowl contender, they weren't at the top, but they were in that conversation. When I was doing the talkSPORT rankings all season, they were in there a lot, and they just fell off. You had injuries, you had issues, you had a suspension. They're not the same Texans team. They're playing at home. They won the AFC South. You should have picked them to win the AFC South.
Yeah,
the Jaguars.
You should have picked them to win the AFC South because nobody else in that division is a serious football team.
Nobody else is any good.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. But the Texans aren't very good right now, but they're playing at home. And this is a city, I know this city very well, obviously, that is going to show out and show up for this team. But I like this Chargers team. I like Justin Herbert. I don't think Ezekiel Elliott really matters. I'm not really sure about that addition. But Harbaugh, the other Harbaugh brother back in the playoffs with so much to prove. It's an early game, which it usually is at Energy Stadium. It's a weird game for the Houston Texans. I feel like if they win it close, and at the end, I won't be shocked at all. And I believe the Los Angeles Chargers will win that game.
Yeah, I like that. Chargers are a favourite on the road for this game, and I'm also going Chargers in this one. I think the interior of that Houston offensive line is just a clown car.
They've had issues all season. They need a new offensive line in Houston.
They need a new offensive line, and they need a new offensive schema because Bobby Slowick just isn't it. And
why does he keep getting he gets interviewed for head coaching positions?
Last year, he was a buzz name and got interviewed by 2 or 3 people.
He must have a good
agent
agent or something.
This year, he's being interviewed by the Jets. We can't take anything the Jets do seriously.
That's a good point. If the Jets interview, you're not really a candidate.
Yeah. They're interviewing Arthur Smith as well. Like, they might as well be asking Adam Gase to come out of retirement.
Or Will Gavin. They could be interviewing Will Gavin to be their head coach.
I back myself to do a better job than Bobby Slowick as head coach of the New York Jets. I truly do. I just think that the Chargers have managed to create a pass rush using a rotation of players all season. Their back end of their defense is really great. And across the board on the offense, outside of they have had some wide receiver drop issues, Lad McConkey's so good.
Yep.
The run game's getting healthy with J.K. Dobbins. Their line looks great, and Justin Herbert is a superstar. That Chargers team are too good for that Houston Texans team. I do think they then have to go on the road to Kansas City.
Let's not go that far.
If they, based on everything else I'm picking, that game to me is huge. We're a week away from it, but can the Chargers beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead?
What's the most interesting game for you in non-Super wildcard weekend?
Non-Super wildcard weekend or for this weekend?
We don't call it Super wildcard weekend. Wildcard weekend.
Sorry. For wildcard weekend. The game, Eagles-Packers screams out to me as a game that is going to be
even without Christian Watson?
I think my concern for the Packers is that if you'd asked me about this game 2 weeks ago and you told me Packers are going on the road to the Eagles, I'd be like, oh, that's real upset watch. The last 2 weeks, the performance against the Vikings just was no cohesion on the offensive side of the ball. And then against the Bears, they did play a bunch of their starters. They were pretty much locked into their seeding by the end of that game and weren't resting guys because they wanted to go and win that game of football.
I thought Matt LaFleur, I watched that game. I thought Matt LaFleur just looked lost in that game. Jordan Love goes down. You put Malik Willis in. He deals with a little bit of an injury. I hate it. And I'm not a Packers fan or supporter. I'm not anti-Packers either. I'm in the middle. I hated that they had Jordan Love warming up late in the game like they had to win it, even though he was still questionable. You either put him back in that game or he doesn't touch a football. You shouldn't have Jordan Love warming up and you're thinking about it. That just to me looks like total coaching decision. He was arguing with a coach on the sideline. You're talking about the number 6 or 7 seed. You're either in it to win the Super Bowl or not. Matt LaFleur looked lost in that game, and I hated losing Christian Watson. I don't think the Eagles are going to be threatened at all by the Packers.
It's really interesting because on the other side, on the AFC side, you had very much this approach of, and even with like the Rams, you had very much this approach of, we're going to rest all our starters. Yeah. We don't care about the 3 or the 4 seed. We might get a more difficult team in week 1 of the playoffs, but the fact is we're going to have to beat really good teams if we're going to go to the 100%. Super Bowl. I'd much rather rest our players and be ready to go. They started their starters and lost to a Chicago Bears team who hadn't won since they were in London 12 weeks ago.
The Chicago Bears, who the last I heard did not make, is that correct, Will?
Yes,
they did not
that's
make
correct.
the playoffs.
12 straight losses it would have been if the Packers could have turned them over. And yet they beat their Packers streak, they beat their streak on in-season. It was a horrible performance from the Packers. And so I go from a game which 2 weeks ago I would have loved and been all over and thought was really tasty. And I now look at it and think, that should be an easy Eagles home win and on to week 2 of the playoffs.
So I don't want to nerd out here, but there is a game that really intrigues me just because there's usually a game every year that it kind of comes out of nowhere and you're like, oh my God, and it shakes the whole thing up. I'm not saying that Denver is going to beat Buffalo in Buffalo. That would be absolutely crazy. However, Bo Nix.
Only one of us makes stupid predictions, as we now know.
I just made a few. I'm gonna be wrong next week. That's how it goes. You bat 500, hopefully. Bo Nix has something to him. He also might throw 4 picks. Sean Payton has been there and done it and knows what to do. He's really got 2 weeks to prepare for this game.
How much are you putting in them beating the Chiefs' backups 38-0? Like,
I'm gonna give you a double zero. That is the most meaningless game in the world. And the fact that there are people out there, I don't even gonna mention people, there are people on Twitter who are tweeting for Elon about, like, oh my God, the Chiefs have ruined the integrity of the NFL. They were the number 1 seed. They're trying to win 3 straight Super Bowls. They don't care about the Broncos in Week 18. So I don't put any stock at all, Will, into Denver winning that game. I don't care if you win it 100-0 or 21-20. However, this is a pretty good Denver team. They started well, slid, and they found it again a little. You have Bo Nix, you have Sean Payton, and sometimes Sean Payton said it this week. Those young, naive, they don't really know any better, but they still have some veterans. That could be a dangerous team. There's a lot of pressure on Buffalo. There's always a point where Buffalo usually cracks. And I hope it doesn't happen this year. I hope they're in the Super Bowl. I won't be shocked either, though, if Denver really gives Buffalo a run, but the Bills also might win 40-0.
I tell you what I do like it. I do like the Broncos' offensive line. I think Miners should be an all-pro player. Yeah. I like the tackles on both sides, and Bo Nix has shown really good understanding of how to control the pocket. So I think they can score points on Buffalo. I just don't think they can stop Buffalo from scoring 40+.
Yeah.
So I'm still picking the Bills. My one is Rams-Vikings, though. I love Rams-Vikings.
That's a good game. That might be the best game of the week.
Kevin O'Connell was on that Rams staff. He was the quarterback coach when they went and they won the Super Bowl 4 years ago with Matthew Stafford. He now returns to the stadium in which they won that Super Bowl with his now all of a sudden banged up Minnesota Vikings team, who had a relatively, almost a borderline embarrassing loss to the Lions in a game where they could have sealed the 1 seed. Going up against the Rams team who did rest their starters,
Speaking of predictions, you've been saying
off.
For 6 weeks now, watch the Los Angeles Rams. Credit to you on that one. What if the Rams knock the Vikings out of the playoffs?
I love the Vikings defense. Andrew Van Ginkel is a superstar. I love the way they fly around. I love the way they blitz. I love the scheming of Brian Flores. But I really fancy Sean McVay to put something smart together for them, where they're getting the ball out quickly, where they're attacking them in those weaker areas over the middle. I'm having it. I think the Rams.
Is this a prediction?
I think the Rams might upset the Vikings, because that's not considered an upset. That's considered an upset, even though they're the home team. The Vikings on the road going as favourites, 14-2. We all wanted to see that maybe as the NFC Championship game, for them to have to go back to Detroit during the divisional round. I think they might be one and done. 2 more games that we do need to pick. Ravens Steelers on the Sunday morning, Saturday night here at 1 a.m. The Ravens finally got over their Steelers hoodoo 3 weeks ago. Part of that Christmas slate. That defense, we've talked about how brilliant they look right now. They have figured everything out in front of Kyle Hamilton. They did the smart thing, which is take your best player and instead of trying to make him play everywhere and move him around the formation and try and get fancy with him, just have him do what he does best and run the rest of the defense.
I feel like that game's already enough chatter on that. When that game is already over, Ravens.
Russell Wilson's not.
The Steelers have nothing right now. They've completely lost it. They gave away the AFC North. I actually think Mike Tomlin should go a little crazy in a good way. Play Justin. You want to win that game, you're gonna have to steal that game in Baltimore. You're gonna have to get cuckoo. You need to have Justin Fields in certain formations. Use him as much as possible. Russell Wilson is not gonna beat Lamar Jackson 40-39. The Baltimore Ravens win that game. What's our last one?
Commanders v Bucks, final game of the weekend. Jaden Daniels, offensive rookie of the year in everything but name at the moment. That offense is just absolutely purring right now. And even when they put the backups in, looked good. But Liam Cohen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, this is an offensive juggernaut right now. This game could have 80, 90 points in it, and I'm so here for it. I think this could be the sneaky game of the weekend. I think I fancy the Bucs at home to outscore Washington.
I'm taking the Commanders. I'm taking Jaden Daniels. Imagine the buzz in Washington, D.C., if the Commanders win that game and they're in they're in the NFC Championship. What it would be like in that city after everything that franchise has been through the past couple decades. I love everything about, and Jaden Daniels, he's played in huge games before. It's not like he hasn't played, he's played in huge college games before. He's so poised, he's so confident. I like Baker Mayfield. I have a lot of respect for Baker Mayfield, what he's been able to do the last couple of years with the Bucs. I'm taking the Commanders in that game.
All right, we split on that one at least. I'm taking the Bucs, you're taking the Commanders. That rounds off our Super Wildcard weekend. Unbelievable coverage on talkSPORT across the board. You'll be able to get all of our 5 out of the 6 games live on talkSPORT 2. Brilliant coverage at talksport.com and here on talkSPORT End Zone. Up next, we're going to get into the head coach firings, Black Monday. Who got it right? Who got it wrong? All right, welcome back to talkSPORT End Zone and the NFL Rundown. And look, the season is in the books. Playoff football is here. But as always, the Monday after the Sunday, Black Monday. We only saw a couple of firings this year because so many got rid of people in mid-season. And actually, while recording the show, we've just had the breaking news that the Titans have moved on from Ron Carthon, their general manager. We're going to talk about who got this right, who got this wrong, where should people land, and actually, why haven't some teams fired, guys?
That's my favorite part. That's what I want to get.
There are a couple that are absolute head scratchers. But I'm going to start on that Titans one because this is fascinating to me, right? The Tennessee Titans get the #1 overall pick. They have their brain trust of offensive line coaches who are, fronting this organization as head coaches and offensive coordinators right now. They want to build in the trenches. They want to be this certain style of team. I really don't understand teams in the NFL who don't try and create a unity between the general manager and the head coach. In theory, those two individuals are as important as each other. Unless you've got a Bill Belichick type who does it all, those two need to be as in lockstep as anyone in the NFL. And just this rotation of getting rid of one, Ryan Carthon would have been part of the hiring of the head coach last offseason. Now he's been fired while they've spent the last 6 months scouting players to pick at #1 overall. So you're bringing somebody in new to that job who hasn't been doing the legwork that he's been doing, who hasn't got the unification with the rest of the organization. And then in a year's time, they'll end up sacking their head coach and it will just become this rotation. And you see bad franchises do this nonsense all of the time. And it's why you're picking #1 overall, Tennessee. And it's why you're not going to get good despite you're picking #1 overall.
Yeah, I'll go a little deeper on that, Will. So #1, the Tennessee Titans had a pretty darn good coach last time I heard, named Mike Vrabel.
Oh.
Okay, Mike Vrabel is now one of the lead candidates for multiple jobs across the NFL. There were multiple reports around the time that Mike Vrabel left that he did not get along well with the general manager. You're not even talking about the franchise. You're talking about very poor ownership in Tennessee. #1, and yes, this is a personal thing, the whole stealing the Oilers back. One of the stupidest decisions I've ever heard of in my life. You don't deserve that logo. You can't have that logo. That logo belongs to the city of Houston. Much more importantly, though, if you're going to have the #1 pick, the only thing you do, because you mentioned perfectly that you spent the last 6 months scouting, this is what every team would do if they were well run. You would keep your general manager until the draft and you fire him the next day.
Yeah.
That has happened a billion times. I covered an NBA team, the Portland Trailblazers, basically went to the draft, had the draft, and fired their GM on the spot. And the owner, Paul Allen, basically flew down on a helicopter to fly him in Portland from Seattle. That is how you do it in pro sports. Pro sports means professional sports. You're not professional if you fired your GM when you just got the #1 pick and you've only got a couple months left before the draft. And they have a huge decision. Are you taking Travis Hunter? Are you taking Shedeur Sanders? Are you taking Cam Ward? You're affecting your franchise for years. That means that you got it wrong last year. So yeah, we can talk about the Jaguars and the Raiders and the Patriots and run down the list of New York Giants. God, they look like an absolute disaster again. But yeah, the Tennessee Titans look horrible because that means that you didn't believe in your general manager last year and you kept him. But if you were smart, you would have fired him after the draft. Now you're going to pay him for no reason, and you haven't decided anything.
What it does show, though, is it does show that there is still the possibility of teams to move on from people. It doesn't have to have happened by Tuesday. And
100%.
Teams love to get ahead of the process. Teams love to get in there so that they can be first to interview guys. They can do it before they're playing in the playoffs, before that window gets closed. Before we get into the jobs that are open, who has dropped the ball here? Who has gone, no, I'm going to stick with my guys, and absolutely just whiffed on it?
Yeah, I've been waiting for this the whole show. So 2 big votes on this. Number 1, how much time do I have? The New York Giants. So Brian Daboll was a really smart pick as a head coach 3 years ago. You got Daniel Jones wrong. You got Saquon Barkley wrong. That's on your GM and your owner, and this was all documented on Hard Knocks. But Brian Daboll has looked absolutely clueless for the last year. He's lost it with the media. He's lost it with the fans, with the teams, with the players, with how he handled his quarterback across the board. You can't bring back Brian Daboll. But not only did the Giants do that, they brought back their head coach, speaking of being in sync, and their general manager. Where are they going? Brian Daboll, you didn't hire Brian
Joe
Daboll.
Schoen, who last year went, we shouldn't pay Saquon Barkley. No one in the league is going to pay Saquon Barkley the money he wants. Oh, wait. You mean our biggest rivals did that and he ran for 2,000 yards?
He looks like he's a reality TV general manager. He's somebody who has the job because he looks like he should have the job. He's not qualified in New York to have that job. Any GM in the world would have kept Saquon Barkley, and you can't let him go to the Philadelphia Eagles. And he just had the best year in 30 years as a running back. But Brian Daboll wasn't hired, Will, to do rebuilds. Brian Daboll was hired to win now, and they're not going to win now. My other vote, and this is a big one, and I've talked about this team all season. But speaking of being in sync and not being in sync and looking like an absolute joke, the Jacksonville Jaguars, every time that I want to think you can't get any dumber, the Jacksonville Jaguars as a franchise lower the bar.
They're right to move on from Doug Peterson, right? That's the right decision.
Their general manager.
A year late. But
they are a clown show. They are an absolute clown show. Pat McAfee wants to take shots at Indianapolis Colts. The entire Jaguars fans hate that decision to bring Trent Baalke back as general manager more than anything I've seen. You go on their social media pages, it's filled with clown emojis. Shad Khan looks like he has no idea what he's doing as an NFL owner. He should sell the team right now. You can't do that, Will. You have Trevor Lawrence. You have to get it right. They're picking high again. They are a joke of an NFL franchise.
If I'm going to defend it in any way, and trust me, I'm not, but the draft picks this year haven't been bad, particularly Brian Thomas. And actually, ones from recent years have started to suddenly come good. My problem with it is that Trent Baalke, I don't know what he has over NFL ownership. And
for San Francisco, right? Like he's somehow survived. He's like the cockroach of nuclear destruction. He always finds a way to kind of get through the crevice and peek his head out and be like, I'm still here.
It's bizarre to me, right? Because when Jim Harbaugh left the 49ers, Trent Baalke should have been fired then. And he hung around and oversaw 2 of the worst head coaching appointments of all time. I mean, Jim Tom Sula's a lovely, lovely man, but he was never cut out to be a head coach in the NFL. He oversaw some of the worst draft picks I've ever seen. And then Jacksonville go, well, yeah, but he did take that 49ers team to a Super Bowl. All of his good draft picks that happened in San Francisco happened in a 3-year stretch where they had Scott McLuhan there, who then went and built the Seahawks Super Bowl team straight afterwards.
Super Bowl? The head coach and the quarterback and the defense and the team or the general manager? Everybody else, not the general manager.
None of it was Trent Baalke. He is a guy who I don't know what pictures he has on file of all these NFL owners, what dirt he must have to still be in the league. But this guy should have been out of the league 10 years ago, he is still getting a job.
He signed off on hiring Urban Meyer to be Trevor Lawrence's first head coach, and he still has survived, Will. I just don't understand that at all. So talking about who missed...
And yet Shad Khan in his statement went, I'm going to work closely with Trent Baalke to decide who the right person to take this forward is.
And then Shad Khan comes out and says, now the answer is to have deception in the NFL. Like the only way to win in the NFL is you have to be really deceiving. You're going to go hire Josh McDaniels to be your head coach? You're going to hire some offensive coordinator in high school? That just sounds like an owner who doesn't know what he's doing, and it's holding the entire franchise and the team back because, as you just said, they have some pretty good talent, but the chemistry isn't there, the execution on the field isn't there. I don't get it at all.
What I will say on the flip side, and the positivity for Shad Khan, is that as much as he's getting the business decisions wrong, he's at least willing to invest, willing to put money into the situation. He is supporting his team, and he is trying to make this work.
Or he's throwing money away.
That's another way of putting it and a very astute way of putting it. My problem is that, like you mentioned, the Indianapolis Colts and everything Pat McAfee's been saying. So everyone's looking at it going, Shane Stein should be fired. Chris Ballard should be fired. They did nothing last year to build on this team. They had the opportunity in free agency to go and improve in every position. They had draft picks galore. Like, they were a team who could have tooled up, gone and won a bad AFC South and been a good team again. And they're just that team who sit right around 6 or 7 wins and never really improve. But what I think people don't see is how much that is to do with ownership. Jim Irsay, not only as the public face, as the guy who tweets some absolutely insane stuff, who does wild interviews, who has a history of issues with, you know, substances and everything else, like a guy who is a wild individual regardless.
A guy who only owns an NFL team because he is filthy rich. That's the only reason he's an NFL. He's qualified to be an NFL owner.
But he is also insanely stingy. Like, he is a guy who does not invest in contracts, who does not invest in staff, who does not put money behind the team. He does not make these contracts. Everyone sees a salary cap and they go, well, that makes it fair. But it's not. When you have different owners approaching these contracts in different ways, if you have a situation like you have in Philadelphia, where they can front load contracts, where they can pay Jalen Hurts the way he should be paid, suddenly he's not making any real hit on your cap, and you can then spend money on your defensive line, your offensive line, and you build a juggernaut. You pay the guys up front and you make it work. The Colts are the exact opposite of that. They are a complete and utter mess. Their salary cap is all over the shop for the future. I think they probably should have moved on from Steichen and Chris Ballard, but I wouldn't take that job if I had the opportunity.
And that was my thought. I would have too, and I would have moved on from Chris Ballard years ago, and Colts fans want that. But you can't fix the owner. And I actually, one team I want to get in really quick, the Las Vegas Raiders. I've been saying I would not have brought Antonio Pierce back.
Have they definitely brought Antonio Pierce back?
They haven't. So we're recording this. We're recording this live. This could change. But as of right now, Antonio Pierce doesn't even know if he's coming back, by the way. He gets asked about it. He's like, well, I think I'm still here. That tells me everything about how the Las Vegas Raiders are run.
I really thought that they were going to be the prime landing spot for Vrabel.
I did too. And
Tom
Brady, that would have been smart.
Like, let's bring that together. And they're just inactivity, bad ownership again. It's amazing that in a league where you have the draft, where you have salary caps, where you have everything designed to create parity, that there are some teams in Cleveland, now in Vegas, but previously in Oakland, these teams who just manage to contrive to just be god-awful.
And just really quick, look at the standings this year and look at the playoffs, right? Almost all the teams in the playoffs in general are pretty well run. And it's been a while since we've seen this many bad teams. There are some really bad teams in the NFL right now, and it's often because ownership is so bad.
Brilliant stuff. Right, talkSPORT End Zone here, the NFL rundown. We didn't actually go through the open head coaching vacancies. I mean, maybe we can save that for next week's show. Maybe we'll do it in the next section. Who knows? You'll have to stick around and find out up next. Right, you're back with the NFL Rundown, and technically this is our extra point section, except we went off so hard on teams
the Jaguars
who didn't fire
so
their
angry.
coaches. We haven't talked about the ones who actually did. The Jags did fire their head coach. They moved on from Doug Peterson, and there's elements of that job that I think are attractive, mainly Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas. Like, there are players there, and there's a decent draft pick, and there's some cap, and there's stuff there that you think might attract somebody.
A good up-and-coming or veteran head coach, not ageist at all, can come in and win 7 to 9 games next year. And if you get lucky, you could win 10 games the next year, but they have to fix Trevor Lawrence. That might be hard to do.
So 4 of the jobs available. 3 of them we knew out in season. The Chicago Bears, the New Orleans Saints, the New York Jets all fired their coaches in season. You add the New England Patriots to that. What did you make of them moving on from Gerard Mayo, going one and done? It's become much more of a trend in the NFL. 10 years ago, a one-and-done coach was like a jaw-dropping thing to happen.
Tom Sula, right? There was like, oh my gosh, how could they do this? It's so crazy. Now it's commonplace. Well, I covered back-to-back.
There's been 6 in the last 4 years.
Well, one of my claims to fame is that I covered back-to-back one-and-done head coaches with Houston Texans. I covered who even remembers David Culley? Covered David Culley and Lovie Smith. I don't have hours to cover that era, but I've covered that stuff before. And overall, it is brutal. And in the end, you're just trying to find the right head coach. You're rebuilding. Your organization is a mess. Then miraculously, somebody will come and fix you. And that happened with the Houston Texans. But that's usually why you do the one and done. For me, I have no problem with it. I've seen a lot of this on social media and out there. I never believed in Jared Mayo as a head coach. And I don't believe in opening press conferences. Like, you can't win an opening press conference, and usually you end up losing in the long run if you do. But Jared Mayo coming out and saying, we're going to burn a lot of cash in free agency, Will, and then having to come out and say, well, I misspoke. I didn't really mean that. I'm sorry. I'm very cutthroat and ruthless with this because I know how cutthroat and ruthless the NFL is. I covered it for a long time. in the trenches. If you say that, that means you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, that means you don't know what you're talking about, and you're not qualified to be the head coach. You might have been a good linebacker, you might be a good guy, you might mean a lot to the Patriots, and on and on. But you have to be smart. You have to be good enough to do the job on a billion levels. Jerry Mayo was not cut up for that job. They had to get rid of him.
It's funny because the two worst opening press conferences from head coaches in the last decade, I would say, or the worst received, let's put it that way, Nick Sirianni and Dan Campbell's, where everyone laughed at him for the bite the kneecap thing, right? They're the 1 and 2 seed in the NFC now.
Yeah.
Those guys are actually good coaches.
Opening press conferences are so overrated, yeah.
But they didn't come out and make promises. That's the point. They talked about culture. They talked about what they wanted the team to be. I look at these openings, right? The Jets have no idea what they're going to do at quarterback. They still got Aaron Rodgers in the building. What a kind of...
And Aaron Rodgers doesn't know what he's going to do with his future.
The New Orleans Saints, finally, cap hell has come back to bite them. And they should move on from Mickey Loomis, but they're not going to move on from Mickey Loomis, who has been running that thing, the puppet of every string in both that building and with the Pelicans as well for the last 20 or 30 years.
He's like this. He's the sports godfather of New Orleans.
He has driven that organization into the ground, and they're a 5-year project. If someone comes in and takes that over, you're not aiming for next season or the season after. You're looking down to 2029.
For New Orleans, you know what they should hire? They should hire like the next great young college coach, because you're exactly right. You come in and you say, hey, we're going to lose up front. You give me the keys. Trust me. I have the master. You have to have a book. You have to have like a 500-page Tolstoy novel, and this is the plan, because it's going to take time in New Orleans.
You're going and knocking on some doors in Oregon. You're going and knocking on some doors. Like, there's a few teams who are in those college playoffs who might have some head coaches potentially interested. But what I want to talk about is the Patriots versus the Bears. Because there was this idea with these opening head coaching vacancies that because the Bears had Caleb, because they have got some good pieces on defense with the injuries this year, because they've got Roma Dunze, and because they've got other pieces in the receiving corner, there is something there where the right combination of head coach comes in and they can make that work. It terrifies me that they kept hold of Ryan Poles and that they're still good. He's going to be allowed to see a third head coach. That very, very rarely works in the NFL. And there's just a part of me that watching what Drake May managed to do, knowing that of the 3 key positions in the NFL, the 3 positions that are the hardest to get right through the draft, pass rusher, quarterback and corner, they've got 2 of those sorted. Drake May, I think, is a superstar. What we saw from him in the second half of this season, there's part of me that if I was redrafting this draft would consider taking him over Jaden Daniels.
Wow.
I'm that high on him.
Wow.
Christian Gonzalez, for me, outside of Pat Surtain, I think he was the best corner in the NFL this year, in a terrible football team. They have building blocks. They have an owner who you know will give you time if you give him a little summit. I really think if I'm Ben Johnson, if I'm Liam Cohen, if I'm one of these hot young head coaches who are supposedly nailed on for the Bears job, I'm looking at that Patriots job and thinking, actually, Foxborough might be the spot for me.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. I'm taking that Bears job. Caleb Williams, to me, has enough in him that we saw last year that he can be special. I'm on record. I'm not the world's biggest Caleb Williams fan right now. And he's also a powder. He can be a loser. And I feel like he needs to be more solid. Caleb Williams needs to, in the new year, find that middle. Don't be so high and so low, which we all need lessons about that in life. But the Bears job for me, you have enough pieces. The Patriots, I don't believe in the Patriots franchise right now. I personally don't think they have enough pieces. I think Drake May is the 3rd or 4th best quarterback in that draft. If I have to choose between the Bears or Patriots job, I'm taking the Bears job. And I don't know that many head coaches are going to flock to New England, because I feel like Bill Belichick left that organization in a bit of, they're in a mess. They're in a weird period. I think we're going to look back in 10 years, and it took a lot of time for the Patriots to move on from Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. And that's usually what happens historically. You have this dominant era with a head coach and you win Super Bowls and with a quarterback, and it takes you a while to find that new era. We've seen that with New Orleans. I'm taking the Bears job over the Pats job.
It's fascinating. Obviously, the Pats have the better pick in the draft. They're right at the top end. And it's a draft that's full of pass rush talent. Yeah. And that's where they can really improve very quickly. I just feel like there's enough there. There's just, if I'm I don't think
isn't
any
it-
of these jobs are great, though. None of these are screaming out to me.
That's what I was thinking.
Like-
There's none of these jobs, and there's none of the candidates for the jobs. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the next answer. I find it very weird, and this could change in a couple days. That's how it goes in the NFL. That Mike Vrabel, who was Coach of the Year, material Coach of the Year type of guy in Tennessee, did a really great job with that organization that kind of fell off. Mike Vrabel, to me, to the Patriots, just seemed like a lock. I know we mentioned the Raiders earlier, but that hasn't materialized. I would just think Mike Vrabel played there, won Super Bowls with Robert Kraft. Mike Vrabel loves cold weather football. He loves a running game. He loves defense. That is a New England Patriots coach, and he's not really being associated with that job as we speak right now. I think that says something about the job.
You might be talking me into Vrabel for the Bears, though, because actually, he needs to get a good young offensive
Bears
line.
fans want Vrabel. I know that for a fact, yeah.
Caleb Williams' biggest issue is just holding on to the ball too long, and he's trying to do too much.
He's trying to be
prove
USC,
to everyone-
Caleb Williams. You can't do that in the NFL.
He is trying to prove to everyone that he is everything to every man, and that he is a quarterback who can do it all. He can be Peyton Manning, but he can also be Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
And he's not either of those guys. He's somewhere in
great
the middle.
point. I agree with you. Yeah.
So he needs somebody who's going to work with him, but actually a culture guy, somebody who's going to come in and manifest the right environment.
They
with
need
that
a
team.
head coach who's stronger than their general manager, right? Because I don't believe in polls. Bears fans do not believe in polls as a GM. You need a head coach with some power. A lot of it's power, Will. I've covered this stuff before. A lot of it is who has the power in the building. That's the problem with the Jacksonville job. The Jaguars job, you're the head coach. You know who has the power. The kind of owner and a GM who's the cockroach of the NFL who keeps sticking around. Nobody really wants that Jaguars job. It often comes down to roles and power and how it's divided in the building.
It's interesting because I also think with the Bears job, the big name, and we keep saying, is Ben Johnson, right?
Yeah.
And what he's done with Detroit and what he's done with Jared Goff has been nothing short of sensational. With a lot of talent there, really good offensive line, really good receivers, everything else. Jameer Gibbs, how many people laughed at that pick, and now he's ended up being...
He's the new Barry Sanders of the NFL. It's
absolutely
incredible.
Unbelievable. Breaking franchise records, just brilliant. Now he's the bell cow, just love him to pieces. I think the problem with a Ben Johnson type, and I actually kind of think the same about Liam Cohen, although I've got another thought about that I'm going to come to in a moment, is that these geniuses, we're never sure what they're going to be like as a head coach. Talk about the culture thing.
Jonathan
with
Gannon with Arizona, right? Yeah, it works out for Sean McVay, but he's even had issues that couple of years. But to be the head coach, like the right head coach, and you're going to last. It can't be, you're good for 1 year and then you're gone in 2 or 3. It's got to be culture. It's got to be discipline.
And he's been around Dan Campbell for the last 3 years.
And that's but sometimes the offensive geniuses are kind of like the NFL nerds on Twitter, and it's like they're really good on paper, but you put them in the spotlight and they're like, Jonathan Gannon or whatever with the wild eyes.
You want him to be Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, someone who can be a leader of men and also do the
100%.
offensive genius
What is the best?
And we don't know if he's that yet.
If Ben Johnson takes a job, what's the best job for Ben Johnson that's out there right now?
I think it's probably still the Bears because they've got enough that he can hit the ground. Although you've got to go into the NFC North and play against the Vikings, the Packers, and your Lions team.
If I'm Ben Johnson, I say screw it, and I say Shad Khan, I'm taking the Jaguars job. But Balky's out. Make a power play. He can take whatever job he wants. Everybody wants him. Say, I will take that job. But everyone knows that Trent Baalke should be gone, and that's how I become the Jaguars head coach.
I'm going to give you my very quick Liam Cohen thought, because I actually think as a play caller, he's impressed me more than Ben Johnson this year. I think what the Buccaneers have achieved on offense has been nothing short of miraculous. Barring reaching the NFC Championship game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should move on from their head coach.
From Todd Bowles.
Todd Bowles, lovely man. The defense isn't working.
You have my full support on that.
And they should promote Liam Cohen internally.
I'm not a big Todd Bowles believer. Watch him end up in the NFC Championship. But as a head coach, post Bruce Arians and Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, I'm not the world's biggest Todd Bowles fan.
So I think Liam Cohen, head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next year.
That's a very happy New Year type of idea. I like it.
Brilliant. Brian, brilliant stuff from you.
I loved it. It was a fun one, Will.
As always, keep checking out the stuff at talkSPORT End Zone on the channel. We've got exclusive interviews coming up this week with a number of the playoff teams starting tonight with Damian Pierce of the Houston Texans, so check that one out. Should already be up on the channel. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, do all the good stuff. This has been The Rundown.